Now we're going to talk about the midpoint formula. The midpoint is what it sounds like. If you've got 2 points, let's call them again, x1, y1, and x2, y2. The midpoint is halfway between those two. So halfway on the line connecting them, and it's often denoted as xm, ym for the midpoint. So how do we find this? Well, there's a proof for it. I think it's a little bit easier to understand more just as an explanation. So again, if we look at this like we did for the distance formula, if we look at this as a right triangle like this, the x distance, if we look at it strictly on the horizontal, the x distance is going to be halfway between x1 and x2. So if you think about how you find halfway, it's an average. So like if I tell you that your test grades are an 80 and a 90, then you know that your average is 85. It's halfway between the two, right? And if it's numbers that you don't know how to do right away, remember how you find an average, you add the two numbers together, you divide by 2. Or you add 3 numbers together, divide by 3, and so on. So that would also give you 85. Okay, so that doesn't really have anything to do with this one, just reminding you of what an average is. So if we want to find here, if we want to find the halfway point between x1 and x2, it's going to be the average, x1 plus x2 over 2. And then the same thing for the y distance, halfway between the y's is going to be y1 plus y2 over 2. And that's the idea for the midpoint formula. So we say xm, ym for midpoint. The x-coordinate is going to be the average of the x's, and the y-coordinate is going to be the average of the y's. Now, the only thing remotely tricky about this one is that a lot of times people try to put a minus here and here, because almost everything else that we do with points, as far as like slope, the distance formula, things like that, we always subtract the x's and subtract the y's. So the midpoint is different. You're adding the x's and adding the y's. So even when you have the formula in front of you, remind yourself that the midpoint formula is a little bit different because it's averaging, not finding the difference like most other point formulas do. So let's look at a quick example. They're pretty straightforward. Let's say we want to find the midpoint between negative 2, 4 and 1, 2. Okay, so again, we're going to name these x1, y1 and x2, y2. Doesn't matter which is which, as long as you make sure the 1's are together and the 2's are together. And then when we do the midpoint, okay, we're going to plug it right into this formula. So we're going to do x1 and x2 over 2. And we're going to do y1 and y2 over 2. And we can clean this up a little bit. We're going to have negative 1 over 2. And we're going to have 6 over 2. Negative 1/2, we can't reduce that at all, but 6 over 2 is the same as 3. So our midpoint between these two is negative 1/2, 3. Okay, and that's it for the midpoint formula.